I should have known better than to say yes. I wasn't even invited to the party. Hell, I didn't even know whose house it was. But Michael, my oldest friend, had a way of pulling me into things I usually said no to. And that night, for whatever reason, I just didn't have it in me to fight him off. "You never get out anymore," he said. "Come on, just this once." I remember shrugging. I remember the cold outside. I remember how the air felt, thin and sharp in my lungs, the way it always does on those in-between autumn nights. Not quite winter, but getting there. The kind of cold that creeps into your clothes and stays there. The kind you don't notice until you're already too far from home. Michael picked me up a little before 11. He said it wouldn't go late. That we'd stay for an hour, 2 tops. We parked outside a 2-story house on a dead-end street, music already pulsing from the backyard. Kids were everywhere, standing in driveways, clustered on porches, spilling out through open garage doors. I didn't recognize a single face. Then, just as I was stepping out of the car, Michael turned to me and said, "Leave your phone here." I looked at him. "What?" "Just do it, man. You don't want to lose it. You know how these parties get, people bump into you, spill drinks, phones go missing. It's just safer." I hesitated. Every part of me told me not to. But then I thought, whatever. I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid one. The buzzkill. So I slipped it into the glove compartment and shut it without thinking too hard about it. Like an idiot. The moment we stepped through the fence into the backyard, I lost him. 1 second he was there, walking just ahead of me, and the next, gone. Swallowed by bodies, by noise, by motion. I turned in slow circles, scanning the yard for his face, but it was useless. Everyone looked the same under the colored lights and cheap fog from a smoke machine someone had clearly overused. I told myself it was fine. He knew people here. He'd come find me eventually. So I wandered deeper in. There was a fire pit on one side of the yard, ringed with kids smoking and drinking out of plastic cups. A folding table with beer pong near the porch. Some kind of sad makeshift DJ setup in the far corner. It smelled like beer, weed, and something sweet and synthetic, maybe peach vape or cheap cologne. Or both. The kind of smell that clings to you even after you shower. I took a cup from a half-melted stack near the keg and filled it. I wasn't much of a drinker, not really. But I was cold. And uncomfortable. And alone. So I drank. Time stretched. Faces blurred. My thoughts thinned out like mist. Still no Michael. Still no sign of anyone I knew. I don't know exactly when I realized something was wrong. It wasn't dramatic. No music skipping, no record scratch. It was just, quiet. Not around me, around him. Around Michael. Or more precisely, the space where he should have been. I circled the house twice. Backyard. Kitchen. Living room. Even upstairs, where I probably shouldn't have been. Nothing. No familiar jacket, no laugh I could recognize, no one pointing and saying, "Oh yeah, he's outside." It was like he evaporated. I started asking people. "You seen a guy, about my height, dark hoodie, kinda curly hair?" Shrugs. Blanks. "Nah, bro, sorry. No idea." At first, I told myself I'd missed him by seconds. Then I started to wonder if he'd ditched me on purpose. That thought, it didn't hit like betrayal. It hit like something worse. Like a cold you feel in your chest, one that spreads outward and makes the world feel a little less safe. I reached into my pocket, reflexively. No phone. Of course not. I pictured it sitting in the glove box of Michael's car, wherever he was. Mocking me. And that's when it settled in. I had no way to contact anyone. No way to get home. No plan. No backup. I left the party not long after. No one noticed me go. The music grew quieter behind me with every step. The air hit harder out here, sharp, unforgiving. The further I walked from that house, the more it felt like I was stepping out of something warm and into something vast and cold. Something that didn't care if I made it home or not. The streets were darker than I remembered. The streetlights were spread out too far, and the gaps between them felt like something could be watching. There were no cars. No voices. Just my footsteps. I told myself it was fine. That I knew the way. That it wasn't far. That I'd be home in 20, 30 minutes, tops. But even then, something in my gut told me I just made the worst decision of the night. I don't remember deciding to stop walking. It just happened. 1 minute I was moving, the next I was standing still, arms wrapped around myself for warmth, breath fogging up into the empty air, watching the road stretch into nothing ahead of me. My legs ached. My head spun. My mouth was dry as cotton. I felt like a ghost drifting through the bones of a town that forgot it had people. Then, in the distance, headlights. They came slow, cutting through the dark like a blade. 2 soft orbs approaching, humming low and steady. My heart kicked up. Relief, hesitation, fear, they all rushed in at once. But I was too far gone to care. I needed help. I stepped forward and raised my arm, thumb out. Classic hitchhiker pose. Something I'd only ever seen in movies. I felt stupid. Vulnerable. But I did it anyway. The truck slowed. Gray, older. Rust spots along the bumper. The kind of vehicle that looked like it had been through a lifetime of long, lonely roads. It rolled to a stop just a few feet from me. The window creaked down. Behind the glass was a man. Older, maybe 60s. Big beard. Sunken cheeks. Baseball cap. Eyes hidden in shadow. His voice came out soft, gravelly. "You need a ride?" I nodded before I thought better of it. Yeah, I do." He asked where I lived, and I told him the street. It took me longer than it should have to remember the name. He didn't question it. Just said, "All right. Hop in." The handle stuck a little as I pulled it open. Inside smelled like old smoke and something faintly metallic. The kind of smell that sticks to old coats and the fabric of truck seats. I slid into the passenger seat, shut the door, and muttered a weak, "Thanks." The man didn't respond. He just pulled back onto the road. And as we drove, I realized something strange. He never asked how I ended up out here. Not really. For the first few minutes, we didn't speak. The road ahead stretched out, lit only by the truck's weak headlights. They barely reached past the next curve. Everything outside that glow was just black. I kept telling myself I was lucky. That I should be thankful. That this guy saved me from a freezing walk home. But then, I realized something. We were still on the same road. I knew this part of town. I'd walked it before, driven it a dozen times. My street shouldn't have been more than 5 minutes away. 10, tops. But it had already been 15. Maybe 20. And the trees outside were getting denser. Taller. Pressing in closer. I turned slightly toward him. Do you have GPS in here? I could give you the address again." He didn't look at me. Just said, soft and slow, "I know where we're going." His voice, it was calm. Too calm. Like a whisper that didn't need to be loud because it wasn't used to being questioned. I nodded, trying not to let my hands shake in my lap. After another minute, he chuckled. "Just once. Low and dry. You shouldn't drink that much," he said, eyes still on the road. "Makes you soft. Makes people do dumb things." Like walking around alone at night. I forced a laugh. Yeah. Stupid of me. You're lucky it was me that stopped, he added. His hand gripped the wheel a little tighter. You'd make an easy target. My mouth went dry. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing came out. My throat locked up. I glanced down. His hand was twitching on the gearshift. Just a little. A nervous rhythm. I looked out the window. No landmarks. No signs. No houses. Just trees. And that endless, narrow road. My heart was picking up now. I could feel it in my neck, in my temples. I turned to him again. Hey, I think you missed the turn. My house was back there. This time, he looked at me. And he smiled. It wasn't big. It wasn't even particularly sinister. But it was wrong. Something about it felt rehearsed. Like a face someone practiced in the mirror, trying to look human. We're almost there, he said. Then he reached over, slowly, and rested his hand on my leg. I pulled my leg away. Not suddenly. Not violently. Just, enough. Enough to let him know I noticed. Enough to give him a chance to pretend it never happened. But he didn't pretend. He kept one hand on the wheel, his other hovering where my knee had been, as if he was deciding whether to try again. I stared out the window, refusing to meet his eyes, counting my breaths in sets of 4 just to keep from shaking. The road narrowed. The trees pressed closer. There were no lights out here. No passing cars. No signs. Just the hollow roar of tires over cracked asphalt and the occasional creak of the suspension when we hit another bump. I'd stopped trying to recognize where we were. We could have been anywhere. Or nowhere. You're quiet, he said eventually. I didn't respond. I don't bite, he added, with another soft laugh. Not unless you want me to. That broke something in me. I turned. I'd really like to get out now. He didn't even blink. Almost there. No. Pull over. Still driving. Still calm. Still smiling. I reached for the door handle. It was locked. Click. He hit the driver's side lock button with his thumb. Like it was nothing. Like brushing lint off his jeans. I felt it in my stomach then, not fear, exactly. Something heavier. Certainty. Certainty that I was not getting home unless I made it happen. Certainty that I was trapped in a metal box with a man who had plans. I scanned the dashboard. No phone mount. No visible GPS. The radio was off. The heater was on low, humming quietly, filling the cabin with warm air that smelled like rust and old breath. I thought about screaming, but I didn't. There was no one to hear it. Just woods and road and this man beside me, breathing like this was the most normal thing in the world. Then, softly, almost gently, he said. You know what your problem is? You trust too easy. I didn't answer him. Didn't look at him. Didn't breathe. My hand slid slowly back to the door handle, thumb brushing the lock, index finger curling under, trying to remember if trucks like this had child safety features. My other hand pressed down, slowly, quietly, into my pocket, even though I knew it was empty. No phone. No keys. No weapon. Nothing but adrenaline and panic and instinct. He kept driving. Humming something under his breath now, some broken melody, tuneless and soft, like he was rocking a baby to sleep. Or maybe just himself. Then he said something that made my blood freeze. You know, you're not the first. That was it. Just those words. Like they were meant for me. Or not. Like he said them for the silence itself. My body moved before my brain caught up. I unlocked the door, yanked the handle, and threw my weight into it. It resisted. Old truck. Rusted hinge. It gave with a groan, and the cold air exploded into the cabin like a scream. He shouted something. I didn't hear what. I was already moving. I hit the ground wrong. My shoulder screamed. My ankle twisted, but I didn't stop. I ran. Into the woods. Into blackness. Into branches that slapped my face and tore at my jacket. Behind me, the truck door slammed. A voice, his voice, cut through the dark. Hey. Then, louder. Hey, come back. No longer calm. No longer gentle. The softness was gone. He was yelling now, rage cracking through every syllable. A real voice. A voice with edges. I didn't look back. The forest wasn't deep, but it was enough. I ducked behind a fallen tree, breath shallow, heart kicking my ribs like it wanted out. I pressed myself into the bark, trying to disappear into it. And then, quiet. No footsteps. No branches breaking. Just my own ragged breathing and the wind threading through the trees. I didn't know if he was looking for me. Or if he was just, waiting. I don't know how long I crouched there, pressed into the damp side of that tree like it might grow around me and hide me forever. Minutes. Hours. The world stopped running on time. It was only breath and silence and the cold slowly bleeding into my bones. Somewhere behind me, through the dark, the truck engine coughed, then roared to life. Tires spun in wet gravel. Headlights swept across the trees, too far, too unfocused. Then the sound faded. He was moving. But not far. I didn't believe he'd really left. Not yet. Predators don't just give up. I waited. And waited. Every crack of a branch, every sudden shift of wind through the canopy felt like it had teeth. My legs were numb. My hands trembled. Then something broke inside me. Not fear. Not survival. Something meaner. Older. Deeper. He's still out there. The thought repeated, not in panic now, but in rhythm. Like a war drum in my chest. He's still out there. And I'm not gonna die like a goddamn animal in the woods. I stood. Slowly. Every joint screamed in protest. My ankle throbbed, twisted worse than I thought. But I could move. And I moved. I didn't go back to the road. Not yet. I skirted the tree line, staying low, scanning for the glow of headlights. For his shape. His shadow. That's when I saw something I hadn't expected. His truck. Parked. But not on the road. He'd pulled it onto a clearing. Like he knew this place. Like he'd been here before. The doors were open. The cabin empty. And in the glow of the cabin light, I saw something on the passenger seat. A scarf. Not mine. Something floral. Delicate. Too small for warmth. For show. And behind the seat, bundled fabric. Dark, stained. I couldn't see clearly, but I didn't need to. There was a bag on the floor. And from the bag, something metal. Keys. Jewelry. Trophies. I backed away. My heart wasn't beating fast anymore. It had gone still. Heavy. He wasn't just some creep. He was a collector. I was about to step back, melt into the woods again, when I heard it. Not footsteps. Not his voice. A laugh. Soft. Deliberate. Close. Then, his voice. You looked inside, didn't you? I turned. He stood barely 20 feet away, half in shadow, half in moonlight. No headlights now. Just his silhouette, just his voice. And that damn softness was back. I always wonder which ones will look, he said. You're the third. Maybe fourth. I lose count. I didn't answer. I didn't move. Most people don't, he went on. They just run. Or cry. Or beg. I stepped back. He didn't. But you. He tilted his head. You got something mean in you. He smiled again, and this time it was wide. And honest. Not kind. Not warm. Just honest. I gripped a broken branch in my right hand, thick, sharp-ended. I didn't remember picking it up. Maybe I never put it down. Maybe part of me had known this moment was coming. He took a step forward. I raised it. He stopped. Silence. Then he sighed. Not out of fear. Out of disappointment. You don't get it, he said. I let you run. He motioned vaguely toward the woods. I gave you time. I gave you a head start. He stepped forward again. And I ran. Not away. At him. I swung with everything in me. Not with training. With instinct. With rage. With the cold, desperate force of something cornered and alive. The branch hit him square in the side of the head. He fell. Not dramatically, he just crumpled. I didn't wait. I ran to the truck, dove in, slammed the door, locked it. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, his keys, still dangling in the ignition. The engine turned. Coughed. Started. I hit the gas so hard the tires kicked up wet dirt behind me. In the mirror, I saw him. Still lying there. Still smiling. The drive back was a blur of trees, broken lines, and shaking hands. I don't remember steering. I don't remember breathing. I don't even remember if I cried. The road looked different in reverse. Wider. Colder. The trees no longer pressing in, but standing like witnesses, silent and unmoving. They knew what happened. They saw it. They didn't care. At some point, the familiar lights of town began to reappear. Street lamps, gas stations, closed storefronts. Civilization, if you could call it that. But I didn't feel safer. I felt split. Like I'd left some version of myself back there in the woods, on the ground, next to that man. The part of me that still believed nothing like this could happen. The part of me that trusted people because they smiled. I pulled into a random parking lot. I don't know why. A small strip mall, dark, closed for the night. I parked. Sat there. Hands on the wheel. Engine ticking softly as it cooled. The truck smelled like him. Still. Like breath and rust and something older. I opened the glove box. Inside. A lighter. A torn photo of a woman I didn't recognize. A pink scrunchie. A single earring. I closed it slowly. Not because I was scared. Because it felt like opening a grave. The urge to drive the truck into a lake, light it on fire, something, was overwhelming. But I didn't. Instead, I left it in that lot. Keys still in the ignition. And I walked the rest of the way home. I got home just after 4 a.m. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't shower. I didn't even change clothes. I just sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the door like it might open again. Like he might be there. But he wasn't. Of course he wasn't. When the sun finally started bleeding through the blinds, it didn't feel like relief. It felt exposed. Like something was watching me now in daylight instead of dark. I stayed inside for 3 days. Didn't go to class. Didn't tell anyone. What was I gonna say? My friend ditched me, and I hitched a ride with a man who collects trophies from people who don't come back. I didn't even know his name. Just his voice. His hands. That smile. I kept replaying it all, over and over. The branch in my hand. The silence after the impact. The smile in the mirror as I drove away. And I started wondering things I shouldn't have. How many people had sat where I sat? How many saw that scarf? How many didn't run fast enough? Sometimes I wonder if that man ever really meant to kill me. Or if I was just something different. Something that didn't fit the pattern. Maybe that's why he stopped. Maybe that's why he smiled when I drove away. I'll never know. I moved a month later. Different apartment. Different city. Different locks. I don't talk to Michael anymore. I think he texted once. I never answered. Some people leave you behind on purpose. Others just leave you to figure out who you are when no one's watching. And me? Now I never walk at night. Never leave my phone behind. And I never, ever, get into a car with someone I don't know. But the truth is, the worst part didn't happen in the truck. It happened in me. Because since that night, I don't trust faces. Or voices. Or the kindness of strangers. Not anymore. Now, when someone smiles at me on the street, I don't smile back. I wonder what's in their glove box.